Jeannie Cameron, welcome to CamTalks.
Thank you very much.
Jeannie, thank you so much for coming on what is quite a miserable wet day here in January. How's your morning been?
It's been frantic, really. I've been answering emails and text messages and all kinds of stuff.
Because you've just had some pretty big news, right? You're now the chair of our PNF committee.
Yes, Chair of Policy and Finance Committee, which is the lead committee in the States of Alderney.
Oh my God, Jeannie, this is
Yeah.
amazing. So, I mean, before we I guess we get into your life and stuff, but do you want to just tell us a bit more about, what that committee is and I guess how it all came to be?
Yeah, well, there's essentially four main committees of the States of Alderney. The Policy and Finance Committee is the lead one, which essentially makes the sort of final decisions on most financing and the policy decisions. Really, where the other two of the other committees feed up into, and that's the Economic Development Committee, which I was also on for the last year and continue to be on going forward, and the General Services Committee, which covers all of the things that the state's works and all keeping Alderney running. Essentially, is what that committee does. Economic Development Committee looks at all the future development and economic activity that we need to occur in Alderney. And then fourthly is the Building Development and Control Committee. And I was the deputy chair of that, but that committee is sort of separate. It has its own area of law and really looks at the planning and development side of things.
Wow.
And yeah, so essentially I'm the chair of the main
Does this
committee.
mean that you're the most senior politician on our island? Is that right? Is that right saying that?
It's interesting. That's one way of looking at it, but yes,
I
I
love
guess.
it. The big cheese. I've got the big cheese in my bedroom. I mean, my studio, literally. Well, I mean, this is crazy because I think people who don't know anything about Alderney would probably assume that we either completely run by Guernsey or we have something like the UK looking at us. But we are our own government, right? I mean,
Yes.
is that quite strange for a little island like this, 2,000 people?
No, I mean, the UK has various crown dependencies, Jersey, Guernsey, Alderney, and Sark, and the Isle of Man. And each of them have their own sort of jurisdictional, legal apparatus. Alderney has its own parliament. The only sort of major connection was the 1948 agreement, which put Guernsey and Alderney together in a fiscal arrangement. But apart from that, we have all rights and privileges that are our own. We need to perhaps exercise a lot more of them going forward. And the Bailiwick Commission, I think, that's going on or about to start between Guernsey and Sark and Alderney to review that relationship 80 or so years on. We'll start to look at some of those things, to look at what's working
Mhm.
well, what's not working, what could work better. And I think it's an opportunity to really try and get things right for Alderney going forward.
Amazing. Okay, so who are we going to deport first? Do you have powers to get rid of people from the island? No?
No, no,
No.
no, I don't have any special powers. It's all a committee decision.
That's great, and I know this is the right spot for you because you spent your whole career working in large organisations and I guess across government and the private sector. Why don't you take us all the way back to the very beginning? So where were you born?
I was born in Sydney in Australia.
Fantastic, and I guess I mean growing up in Sydney, what was that like?
Well, I grew up largely on what's called the northern beaches. I know everybody knows the southern beaches, Bondi, Coogee, etc. But the northern beaches are far more beautiful, but they're less well known outside of Australia. In fact, I was Miss Northern Beaches
No
back
way!
in the
Oh
day.
my God!
But no, it was a great place to grow up. I learned how to sail. I went to the beach. All the things everybody thinks about what Australia's like. That was my childhood, and it
Wow.
was it was fabulous. We lived in some great places. My mother and father divorced when. Or separated first of all when I was about 9 years old, but they always maintained a good relationship, and so we grew up, very loved. And but my mother was the classic sort of ex-1960s model, hippie, artistic sort of person. My father was in the army, so they made an interesting combination. So I got, in a sense, the benefit of both, my mother's sort of more bohemian side and my father's more organised, and structured sort of way. And he'd been an orphan, so he'd been brought up in orphanages and was quite used to
Oh, wow.
institutions and things like that. So together they were, not perhaps the best suited. My father married the family, and this wonderful family, which was my mother's family, and my my mother married her way out into the world because my father was aide de camp to the Governor General and had this sort of out this very lovely career, which she thought she was going to kind of leave. And he said as soon as he got married that he wanted to leave and
Yeah.
just be in the family, this lovely family that he'd never had. So
Wow.
perhaps that was 1961 that they got married. So I think in those days people didn't really, well, they didn't have sex before marriage probably, and they didn't really get to know each other very well in those days. But they always, even to the time that both of them passed away, they kind of kept a closeness. I mean, they had 3 children together, so but I think growing up with those 2 different dimensions, and so after they divorced, in those days there was no welfare. So my mum, and you had to pick your children up from school, you had to do all that. So it was very difficult for her to work in what she was doing, which by that stage was, she was a television engineer. But you couldn't do that when you had to pick children up, and there wasn't all the after school care things that
Of course, yeah.
there are now. And so we didn't have a lot of money. We grew up, sometimes my mum had this amazing way of finding the most amazing situations, and we lived in a lighthouse for a bit.
What?
We lived actually where Home and Away is filmed. We lived in lots of houses in Palm Beach where my mum was house sitting these amazing architecturally designed houses. And right to the other end of the spectrum, I remember at one point, mum could only afford a garage
Oh,
that had,
wow.
it was like someone's summer sort of garage place, but it had 4 bunks or 4 beds, 2 bunks, and so my 2 brothers and I and my mum lived in there. But she always made it sort of exciting, and besides it was right on the beach, so it kind of, had elements of things. But she brought us up to understand the value of, working hard, getting what you you want. Sorry, I'm getting a bit emotional thinking about my mother.
Thank you.
Um,
Thank you for talking about it. It's
no, just the values I think both my parents gave me
mm.
have stuck with me all this time.
Oh, well, I'm so grateful that we've been able to connect. And obviously when you first came here, I was blown away really, because, for someone who's, always crying out for good leaders, I'm so grateful you're here.
Thank
I'm
you.
getting emotional now. There you go. This is this is prime podcasting, guys. This is
Yeah.
absolutely brilliant. But I mean, it sounds to me that so you had 2, opposite kind of parents. I mean,
Mm.
your dad sounded like he was in quite a high position within the army. Is that right, or at a very
Well,
important
no, an
job?
aide de camp isn't particularly
What's
high,
an aide de camp?
and it's sort of like the some it's called like a in political affairs it's called the Sherpa, someone who goes
Sherpa.
with the ministers somewhere to sort of carry the bags and make sure everything's done. I think an aide de camp, it's more like a the sort of gopher or someone. It's not that excitingly high. No, it's clearly more than that. I think it was
Sure.
like I think he was a lieutenant or a captain or I think captain at that point in the army. So not particularly high, but
But
still an
and he
officer.
was
And
genuinely like married to the army. Is that the way it works? You know?
yeah, well, when you do that job, it's usually a fairly young man. Usually always in the past was men, and someone who probably at that point doesn't have family connections, so they can travel easily with the very senior of the command in
Oh,
the army.
wow.
And you got to go to lots of things, and like in the Miss Australia quest, I remember him always saying that he had to, like, escort or be the dinner table guest with Tanya Verstack, who was Miss Australia. So he got
Oh, poor him.
no, so it was a good job, I think, being in that role. But yeah, you had to be fairly organized, very ordered, very diplomatic, and you probably the selection process for who was going to be an aide de camp was, um, very, they
Quite
needed,
selective.
yeah, yeah. So I think I learned a lot of my methodical thinking, my organizational skills and things probably from my father more so than my
Well,
mother.
that's what I really love about you, Jeannie. You're very organized. I think one of the first times we ever met was at a people's meeting, and I remember looking beside me. I'm like, oh, I wonder who that is. And I saw the amount of notes that you had. I thought, oh my god, does anyone else have notes like this? And I think at the time Ed was writing for the journal, so Ed obviously was equally but maybe not as many notes as you. But that's amazing that you can trace all of that those habits and values back.
Yeah. It's funny actually because I get on well with a lot of my colleagues. Like we work really closely together. And that's because I think we all kind of help each other. And, one of my strengths in helping them is remembering the times and places where we have to be. And for some reason, these things stay in my mind, dates and times. So if someone asks, what day's that, I can say, oh, the 21st of January. And I'll just say it like that because I don't know why they stay in my head. So even yesterday, one of my colleagues said, what time's the states meeting? And I just texted back. But of course, you'd think most people would know that, or someone else will say, "What day is that?" And, "Oh, Jeannie will know, so we'll ask her," or, "Can she send that?" And but I don't mind at all
Yeah,
because
of
to me,
course.
it's at my fingertips, and if I can help like that, I'm quite happy to. But I think it's sort of we have a trust between us, and that's a silly little part of it, but it's just a thing
Oh,
that
Jeannie, honestly, it's a breath of fresh air because obviously for, the last decade, we have had, it's been a bit Game of Thrones, as I always say. It's like you never really know which states members like each other or get on or try and work together. And I really do believe that right now we have the most hopeful outlook, even though actually the world right now is just looking like it's going to hell. Before we talk about more politics and the way the world's going, we're just going to keep going back again because you've been involved in diplomacy from a very, very young age. So, growing up in school, did you always think that you wanted to have a career in politics and within the sort of organizations that you've worked for?
well, when I was at school, the second final year of what I suppose is A levels here, back in those days before computers, there was a folder we were given. It was called the vocational guidance folder, and you had to look through it, and it sort of had A to Z, which had all the sort of job or career things that you might consider. And I did go to an all girls school with nuns. I'm not Catholic, but I went to a Catholic girls' school, and so I was going through this book, like looking at it, trying to sort of work out because when you're 17, 16, 17, you don't really know what you kind of
No
have
idea.
some ideas. And I remember getting to D and seeing Diplomat, and I thought, oh, that sounds good. That's kind of what I'd like to do. Um, and although I think I was kind of told, well, only certain people get to do that. You need to sort of have plan B, and so I think I was going to be a physiotherapist was my other one. But anyway, I just continued through school, and I guess these ideas were going in my head, and I guess in those days as well, you waited to see how well you did in what was called your higher school certificate, and then you knew. And in those days as well, the results were published in the newspaper.
No way.
Yeah, yeah, who would have,
Wow. Oh
Jeannie
no.
Cameron on a statewide basis, and it was like pages and pages of these supplements of you could look up the name of the person. I can't
Wow.
recall if I'm pretty sure it had the score that you got
Oh my God.
and what university you were likely or you'd applied for or something like that. But In a way, it worked because it
I was
put
gonna say that
huge
sounds
pressure on
amazing.
it put pressure on you to perform, as it were. And so I got enough, marks to do what in Australia is called, an arts law. It's like a double law, you do arts and law, or a double sort of degree. So I kind of went down that route, and, eventually I ended up working, in the parliament in Australia, and that happened quite by chance because I I started writing articles because I thought that, and I was writing them in the area of defence, and Australia's involvement in wars and things like that. Mostly, I was interested in it a lot, but also my best friend's father was still in the military, and he would sort of tell me things every now and again. And one day, I submitted an article I'd written to a major newspaper, which was called The Australian, daily newspaper, and the editor decided to publish it. And that kind of I was so excited by that I started writing a lot more things about defence and became a defence correspondent for a particular defence magazine. And then I decided, I think I'm going to try and use the politics side of my degree. And I thought, I wonder how you do that. So in those days, once again, you get on the phone. So I I rang up. I looked up who was the Minister for Defence, who was the Shadow Minister for Defence, and then I just rang up
You
the
just
office.
you just called them.
And the minister's office said, "Well, actually, you have to go through this process, and can you submit your, credentials or whatever to there?" And I thought, "Okay, right." I took the notes down, and then I rang the Shadow Minister for Defence, and by chance, he answered the phone because in those days, of course, and especially in opposition, you only had 4 staff, as it turned out. And, I sort of said, I was Jeannie Cameron and I'd written these articles, very important. And, I was looking for a job in politics and, how would one go about it? And he said to me, "Actually, we have an opening coming up as a researcher," one of my staff, and he was just like, "Oh," and he said, "Yeah, okay." We took down a few notes and whatever, and so I went to my father, I was still living at home then, and I said, "Dad, can you lend me the money? I want to fly to Canberra because there's a job I want to go for." So what I did, once again, back in the day, it was still, there wasn't a lot of security and what have you. I just caught a plane to Canberra, turned up at Parliament House, went to the office of the Shadow Minister for Defence and said I wanted the job. And I think he was probably just blown away by my gumption to have taken that. So I got that job, and, I did that for a while, and then there was a reshuffle, and my, minister was, one of the only ones who went out in support of the one who lost the so it meant, but another, senator then came and offered me a job, and so I went to work, and so I that was defence person because he was defence and, the other one was defence science and personnel, so and also took on had a few more portfolios. And that was a real scrutinising area as well, because the Senate is to scrutinise the House of Representatives a bit. Well, it's more of a scrutiny function. It's always known in Australia as keeping the bastards honest, and so you had to really get into. And my job was scrutinising bills before Parliament, scrutinising legislation, going through it, looking at, and providing my politician with all of the relevant information to take into the committees that they were going into, and also for what we called Senate estimates committees, which are the finance appropriations. So you would be really scrutinising everything in the government's financial accounts, and so that covered quite a number of portfolios. So I suppose at quite a young age, I think I was only in my 20s, early 20s, I got quite involved into understanding how government finances, public accounts, how those are made up, policy development, because you're also developing policy. I worked closely on the GST policy that Australia brought in, and various other areas. And I think to get onto, I was there for a number of years, and then uh, I then decided I would take a bit of time in the civil service. So I saw a job that I felt was the international legal section of the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet. And so it had two jobs actually. The other one was for the economic and social part of it. And I thought I'd apply for both. I was probably more interested in the economic one.
Mm.
But then at the last minute, I phoned them up, used that phone again, and said, actually, I'd rather the international one. And I ended up in that job. So once again, I was still quite young, and I ended up traveling to all parts of the world with the government. I travelled with our Prime Minister, Paul Keating at the time, to the World Summit for Social Development, which is
Wow.
where
God.
Bill Clinton, and I met Fidel Castro, because
No way.
I met lots of leaders at that point. Well, there were only four of us: the Prime Minister, the head of the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, our ambassador, and me. So I got some really amazing access and just watched and saw and learned, and it was
Wow.
and then I went on to do lots more of those activities with the government. I went to the UN in New York, and it was the first time I was on my own and I had to speak for Australia, and I didn't quite know the rules of it, of how you put your flag. And I had Austria sitting next to me, and very nice chap, and he said, "Well, you put your flag up like that," and then the person at the front, the convener of the relevant meeting, and this was the Economic and Social Council of the well, it was the UN Economic and Social Council, and we had to talk on various, and it was human rights issues and other things. So I had to, before that, coordinate Australia's views. That was the role of the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, to coordinate our views across a whole range of issues through interdepartmental committees, get them all together, put it together so you knew what your speaking points were and what to talk about. So I remember putting my flag up for Australia and doing my
Oh
bit,
my
and
God.
it was so nerve-wracking,
Yeah,
but
you
at the
must have been
time.
terrified.
But I think the fun thing I found was the UN building in New York. We used the trusteeship council, which is hardly ever used anymore, because it used to be the place where they would oversee colonial governments. But of course, that wasn't really used anymore. And then next door to that was the Security Council, with that round table that we all know.
Of course.
And so it was very exciting to sort of wander around and look at all these things that.
I bet.
Um, and in that I met Madeleine Albright. I had tea with her, and Hillary Clinton at the time, who was a politician, and there were lots of.
Was she a politician then, or was it her
I'm
husband? Or
I think this was 1990s. Um, I think I think she had a role in. Oh gosh, I must be getting old. I can't exactly
well, no, but
remember
she
her.
must have been the first lady, and then carried on into
Possibly.
politics. Right?
Madeleine Albright certainly had the main role of whatever we were there visiting for, but I was trusted with our head of delegation for that, and we kind of did that. And then there was Beijing. There were lots of different things. The Rio conference in Brazil in 1992, which was the start of the Climate Change Convention, which kind of later on in life got me to, because I'd worked on that, got me into working on the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, back in the early 2000s, and sort of all those negotiations with governments and things like that. But of course, everything has changed. I mean, in those days, Australia may have had something that we wanted to do for a particular reason, and you'd have to get on the phone, and this phone again, oh, before mobiles, and you'd have to sort of ring up Canada and say, like, Australia's wanting to do this. What's your view? And they'd say, well, if the US does it, then we can. So then we had to talk to the US, and the European Union was only 15 members then, and you'd have to talk to them, and then the G77, which was all the developing nations. So I spent a large part of my time negotiating things with governments, and there's one particular thing that was probably one of my proudest moments in that time. It was written up in the newspaper. It was in Beijing, and it was like, I was in this negotiating group, trying to work out and get everybody to accept. It was a notion of family, but I know it's a simple notion, but if you're trying to get various parts of the world to understand the concept of family. Obviously, different people have different views of what that means.
Mhm.
And in the context of the text we were negotiating, that was really a key part of it. So you sort of go through these things, you listen. The European Union wanted to include, at that point, homosexual families. The Vatican and the Catholic countries of the world were going, no, we can't have that. Or and you had these very sort of opposing views. You had Iran. There were quite a lot of discussions, and you had to
Mm.
come to consensus. That was your job as in this diplomatic role to ensure that the text that the governments would come together to agree on, and doing the right thing for whatever it was that the objective was, you could do. And I remember coming up with something that occurred to me, and I went, aha. And so put my little thing up and said, how about we use the words family in all its forms? And I said that way everyone can take out of the international text how they interpret that nationally, which is how treaty law is interpreted, and therefore everyone could live it. And I remember they all start looking around the room, and they'll go, "Yes," and it was written up
Oh, that's
in
cool.
the newspaper that it said something like Australian negotiator Jeannie Cameron saved the day with a tortured phrase of family in all its forms, and it said the Vatican, Iran, all these different countries thanked Australia for its bridge building,
Oh my
which, well, that
God.
it said it argued for 36 hours over paragraph 245B of the text. So it was very parochial, but I felt like, oh my God, I got all these countries to
Well done.
do
Listen,
things.
I feel so underqualified to interview right
No.
now. This is it. I mean, it's amazing. I'm so grateful. And I mean, I don't know much about the UN, and I think in the current state of the world, I think people are questioning,
Mm.
what the UN does, particularly when you have superpowers like America just throwing shots at everyone
Yeah,
right now.
I
I mean,
do. I
what's the point of it?
I do think, yes, I mean, the 1990s when I was doing that is a very long time ago now, and I think the world has definitely moved on from that. Some of the more recent things I've been involved with, multilaterally or internationally, last November, not that long ago, I was invited to go to Geneva for a negotiation on something, to be an expert commentator at an alternate COP, a conference of the parties, which is the governments who come together to discuss the next iteration of a treaty or something like that. But because the UN system, and because in this case, it was the World Health Organization, was so off the mark of anything that even got close to reality of science and evidence. And so I was one of the experts, along with many scientists and doctors from all over the world, who were having this alternate COP and discussing the real issues, because the international system has just lost its way. I think it's been, in an economic sense, captured. It's been captured by those who are dominant. No longer is it sort of the way perhaps it was once when I did work in it.
Mm.
And I think, I'm very critical of it now. I know, if you mention these days that you would do human rights, people they assume that you're sort of a die-hard lefty, and and I'm not at all. In fact, I'm a classic liberal. Really believe in very small government, and believe that government should be there to enable to um, have some regulations around safety, and very clear ones, but it should not in any way get in the way of what people want to do, so long as they know the risks and the harms, and all that sort of thing. That's my philosophy in pretty much everything. um, and so, but I think these international organizations are encroaching far too much into our lives, into domestic policy. That treaty that I worked on, the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, I mean, it was the year 2000. It started in 1999, 2000. It was concluded in 2003 and entered into force in 2005. And what's in the actual treaty is quite all right, but it's the interpretation where these international organizations have taken those views and driven them to the most extremes of in interpretation. And that treaty set a precedent for um, really the first encroachment of a treaty into domestic national policy, because tax is always the sovereign right of states to determine. That is a firmly held view, and yet here was a treaty going in and saying, X amount of tax collected in a country should be used for these purposes and all this sort of
Oh,
thing. And
wow.
and although the treaty itself is very broad on that, so it leaves it up to the sovereign right of states to do, like was done. The World Health Organization in this case has sort of driven that very much towards where it is now, and it's just not, I'd say all of the UN bodies apart from the World Trade Organization, which has always been a rules-based organization, are off the tracks.
It's a real yeah, I'm a little bit terrified the way the world is now, but has it always been like this, but we didn't know about it? Is it because 'cause we're so connected now with, stories, like, we can hear a story instantly, and, I mean, what's going on in Iran right now is obviously terrifying, and they're shutting down internet, but then suddenly, you're getting all these videos out there. You're like, actually, can you control, the fact these stories go out? And sometimes these stories might go out too soon, before resolutions have even been made. And next thing you know, you're having to change the will of the people based on the instant news they get on their phones. Is that a
Yeah, I think that is a big worry, and I think the the what is different between when I was doing this and now, I would say, is back then, as I've mentioned the phone many times,
yeah.
whilst I was in that role in the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, email came in, and and because I was in that department, we were like a test for using email. I know it's hard for you to imagine, Cam, but and it was our X400 or some sort of system that, and also there was a basic internet there that we were sent to the Australian National University to learn, and it was called Archie and Jughead, something like that. But it was before the World Wide Web, and you could use it to search into library databases and academic papers and things like that. And email, but not everybody in the world had email, so you could only sort of really send it between government departments and things like that. It was kind of how it started, and then almost within a year or so, World Wide Web came out, everybody had email, everybody had, and what we know today has developed. Now we're in these modern times, AI. I kinda kept hearing about it, I'm very open-minded to technology, so I was, wasn't shutting it out or anything, but I thought, "Oh, what's that?" And it was in fact, anyone who says older people don't know about this, it was my 80-year-old auntie who just organised a conference in Oxford, this is 2 years ago now, who, told me that she'd done her whole 3-day program and everything and all the, what's on in each, segment of the program using AI. I was like, "Oh, okay." I and she, showed me, about it, and I started to sort of see it. Now that was, say, 2 years ago, and then I sort of dipped in and out a little bit, but I had no, and then I'd say in the last 6 months, oh my god, our iPhones have changed, everything has changed. AI is in everything. I'm not saying it's a good or a bad thing, it's probably a good thing, but it's the speed at which it is happening and therefore the fake news that's occurring. My son sent me something on Instagram just a few last week, and it was, this person who had, some glasses on, just like sunglasses or something, and it had a little app or something in it, and as they walked along, it took a photograph of someone's face, and that face then fed into the internet, I suppose, or into AI, and sort of got their LinkedIn, got their Facebook, got all their and so
Instantly.
instantly, so as they're walking along, and there was one showing someone at a railway station. And so the person with the glasses on, they were Harvard graduates who were just showing what this technology could do. And they walked up to someone that they just instantly, they knew that his name was Fred Smith. And he sort of said, "Hey, Fred." And he goes, "Yeah, yeah, I'm Fred, Fred Smith, and you're from, Vanderbilt University." "Yeah," and he goes, "And you're leading on this?" He goes, "Yeah, well," and just starts having a conversation. So this Fred Smith starts thinking, "This guy knows him, he knows everything about him." Another time they went up in this same thing, they went up to a girl and just said, she was just working away in a park, and he said, "Oh, hi, Sarah," and she goes, "Hi," and he managed within a few minutes, less than a few minutes,
Milliseconds.
to extract her home address and all this sort of stuff, and so it was completely just done randomly by a total stranger, and I think things like that are just it's a good, I mean, the technological development of that is amazing, but I think the speed of people and the world and society catching up with that is incredible.
Mm.
I mean, once again, to take it back to the States of Alderney, I mean, our systems in there are not, they're not even our internet. We had to do all the interviews and talks for all of the Bitcoin people that from home, just so we could get connection. So we were all using Teams so that we could actually talk to the people, because you just can't do it in there.
Mm.
If I've been on a Teams coming into a meeting, you can only hear every second word. I've done it twice now, and it's been the same.
Oh, that's worse,
It's
isn't it?
really bad,
Yeah.
but how we really need to, in this island, ramp up our digital infrastructure, not just for the States, but for everybody. And I know, a lot of people say, "Oh, I've got Starlink, that works," but Starlink only works as well as it works, and it works very well. But the more people that start to go on Starlink, the worse that will
I
become.
have noticed that, yeah.
And that's, I mean, that is an
Mm.
absolute. I did work on infrastructure project in terms of digital networks and things like that some years ago in Surrey, but I think, one of our major economic developments on Alderney, as soon as we can, in my view, would be, after the runway, after some, I mean, there's a lot
The
of
wish
things we
list,
have to
yeah.
focus on, but digital infrastructure is gonna be so crucial
Mm.
to, Alderney's future, because
Yeah,
that's the way of the
massively, yeah.
world, and
I mean, right now I've just been in Bangkok for a few months, and my 5G internet is 250 megabytes on my phone.
yeah,
So it removes the need for Starlink because my phone is hotspotting to my laptop. And
yes.
so you wonder, well, why has the UK not got that? And then you find out it's because our infrastructure is so old in the UK
Mm.
that you'd have to do a complete overhaul of the UK's telecommunication systems just to get similar speeds to what they've got in Thailand. But you think, well, why didn't we do that before? It's like, well, actually, they did it quite recently. And so I think, I mean, and then you can imagine Alderney is probably still miles and miles, miles behind.
Yeah, exactly. I worked in Indonesia in after I left the government, sort of going back there, and they didn't have even a phone network in Indonesia or in Jakarta where I was living. It was very sporadic, but they jumped straight from. Even in the time I was there in the late 90s, they jumped straight from no phone infrastructure to mobile straight away.
Of
So
course, yeah.
the landline sort of thing. So that's why I think a lot of countries in Southeast Asia are for it much more advanced, because they were able to go straight from. I mean, the first time I ever used a text was in Indonesia. You couldn't even use one in Australia at the time, and that was because you had to use mobiles because there weren't really a lot of other phones.
Right,
Whereas in
yeah, yeah.
Australia, everyone had a phone since the year dot, but just an ordinary dial phone. I mean, even your age probably don't really know about dial
No
phones. No,
idea,
I
no
tried to
idea.
explain that to my
Yeah.
son the
I
other
don't
day.
even know how you remembered phone numbers,
In your
like
head,
in your head. Oh
yes.
my God, I can't remember most things in my head. I mean, but this is another problem, I think, that because we're so overwhelmed with information and screens, you kind of have this brain rot, where, what today I'm thinking this, tomorrow I'm thinking that. And then you try and compare it to your neighbor or your parents, and you go, oh my God, we all think different things. And this whole, like, silos of information, like my social media shows a completely different story to yours. And, and I know this because I look at my dad's social media and I think, oh God, we're kind of becoming so I don't know, oversaturated with too much information. But the nice thing is that because of your experience using face-to-face communication, I've got a good feeling that I mean, you don't have to go very far in Alderney to go have a conversation with someone. So I mean, you know, bring it back to sort of Alderney. Let's just sort of go back because you know I know that you grew up in Australia, but you came to Alderney when you were in your teenage years, right? I mean, around
Yes,
18, 19.
18. Yes, that's
What
when I
was
first
what was
came
it
here.
like back then?
It was the same airport.
Is it? No, it wasn't.
It
That was a
was.
temporary structure, though.
It was the same airport, and the same little roller thing that the cases came down. I distinctly remember that from when I first came
And
here.
the noise of the roller.
Yeah, yeah, and there's something quaint about the airport, and 'cause I guess it's always been there. But I flew at that time from Jersey because we had family in Jersey and in Alderney, and so I flew, quite a lot of
That was a
times.
direct flight.
Yeah, back in those days, it was
Damn.
quite a lot of times we flew backwards and forwards as well. It was easy, so it gives you an idea, or at least it gives me a memory of how it was and how it could be, and also flying to Shoreham at the time that I was coming, and that was very close to Brighton, where I had other family. So I think it's happened before; it can happen again.
Absolutely. You do have a lot of family. I mean, like I know everyone on Alderney is kind of, and this isn't when we're not that kind of island, but everyone's related to somebody in a weird way.
Yeah.
So I mean, is it nice that you've all kind of come back, this way?
Well, it was my grandfather who emigrated from Jersey to Australia in 1951 with my mother.
Oh, right. So he was
Yes.
a Jersey born or a
Yeah,
Jersey
I,
boy.
I go back in Jersey 4 generations. I've got my great grandfather's Jersey passport,
Wow.
and what's the name? Forgotten his name. Leo Hellier Woodnut.
Hold on a second. What? Hellier Woodnut?
Yeah.
The Helliers and the Woodnuts out there freaking out right now.
And his younger brother, Walter Woodnut, came back from Australia and instead of going back to Jersey, came to Alderney. So many people will know Alan and Sarah Woodnut. They're technically my mother's cousins, but we just say we're cousins because we're more the same age.
That's amazing. I
Yeah.
mean, that's just what I love about this island is that, we are. I mean, is it harder now for you as a politician? Because now you've got your own family members telling you about their problems as well as everyone else. I mean, like, did you really think that you were going to get involved in politics when you came back to live here?
No, it wasn't my intention. When I first came here, it was quite a rapid decision. I didn't even intend to. I came to a Woodnut wedding, Jojo Woodnut's wedding in 2021, and I hadn't been in Alderney for a number of years. I'd come for different parties and different family connections over the years. I was living in London for 20 years, and and that got me 2021. It was just after COVID. My mother had passed away, who'd been living near me in the UK. And my son was at uni, I was divorced, and I kind of thought after COVID, I'd had in my head where I lived, I had a lovely house. I just renovated it. I just, got the internet there, fastest internet in the UK, which I'd taken 4 years to pioneer to get, and then came to this wedding after COVID. So, and I just looked in Alderney in a different way. My mother always wanted to come back and live here. Um, and I always said, "Oh, what do you want to go there for?" Like, "Mum, like," ugh," and I didn't see it in the way that I saw it when I came back here in 2021, which was because I'd lived in Surrey, and I thought during COVID it was, you couldn't easily get to anywhere. And although I had a nice area a place where I was living, if I wanted to walk to the shops or a coffee shop or the post office, it was 40 minutes through the woods because I lived on the top of Pitch Hill. Um, and it meant that you had to get in a car and you had to rely on the car to go to somewhere. And I remember thinking, do you know what? When I'm older, I really don't want to have to rely on other people at all or rely on having to drive. Because at that point, my mother was not able to drive anymore. And I thought, gosh, she's dependent on me. I really don't want to be dependent on somebody when I'm older.
Mm.
So I started thinking, well, I want to go somewhere. And I thought, Cornwall, Scotland, Wales, somewhere I was thinking, and I'm quite independent, quite happy to be on my own. And so I got in the car after COVID when you could go out and drove to all of those places. I knew Scotland fairly well, but I went to Wales and I went to Cornwall and I was thinking, oh yeah. So then I go to this wedding in Alderney and I suddenly thought, oh, what about Alderney instead? So after the wedding, in the first 2 weeks of September of 21, I came back here with a view to looking at properties for the future, for 5 years down the track.
Mm. Not as soon as you
No,
thought.
no, and then what happened was it was 2 days I was here. The first day I saw about 14 houses. It was just all about getting an idea, and I thought, "Oh, yeah, okay." And I was looking at something quite small. In fact, I even looked at a shop on Victoria Street that had a flat, and I thought, "Oh, I could rent out the shop." And I was thinking very kind of, you know, small. And then on the second day, on the way back to the airport, and the agent said he would drop me at the airport, but he had to stop by somewhere to, excuse me, um, turn on the heating, I think it was, because someone was coming for their second visit of this other house in um, in Alderney, someone coming from Guernsey. So he said, "Oh, you can wait in the car." And I said, "Oh, can I come in and have a look?" So I went in and I just went in the house and I went, "This is the house. I love it. I
I'll
just
take
love
it.
it." Well, I
Wow.
didn't know if I could take it.
Yeah, of course. I mean,
But it was just one of those powerful feelings you get. Oh my God, I didn't have that
mm.
feeling with any other house. It was much bigger than I was expecting
It's a
or
beautiful
even
house, though.
planning. So I essentially went home that night knowing that these people from Guernsey were coming, and if it was the second viewing, they might
They might take
purchase it.
it.
So I said to my son, and he said, "Oh, change is good, Mum." I said to my auntie, she knew Alderney, so she said, "I think it's a good
Go for it.
go for it." Yeah, and my best friend in Australia, who's known me, she's like my sister since I was 14. She said, your whole life you've made very fast decisions, just like that. But they've always turned out well. So she said, go for it. So I did, and that's how I ended up here.
Wow. I want to say a massive thank you to Channel Seaways for sponsoring this podcast and honestly for keeping Alderney alive. They're the reason our food arrives, cars turn up, and occasionally they even ship horses and cannons too. They make it all seem effortless, like clockwork, and thanks to them, we get to feed our families and enjoy a glass of wine at the end of the day. They've been supporting the Channel Islands for over 50 years and with a brilliant team who genuinely care. So go over to their Facebook page, give them a like, show your appreciation, and support the people that keep Alderney civilised. Now back to the episode. Did you, obviously, you've kind of left your career behind and, to come here and to kind of settle down a bit. Did you think that you were going to get back in the ring, in a very different way? What was your first experience of Alderney's politics like?
Um, well, when I first came here, I was still had a big consultancy with a Swiss company, and the first 2 years I was here, I worked on that. Um, In fact, it was to go to the end of 2024, but, in the world, as you say, things are happening, and they were sort of downsizing some of the consultants that they had. So it kinda ended a year earlier than I expected, and that's really when I started sort of thinking, "What else can I do?" I could go out and find another client or something, in a big way, but I thought I'll take a bit of a break. It was a very well-paying consultancy. I'd earned enough money. So at that point, so I thought, well, and that's really when I started getting really interested in the politics sort of side of things. And then it came to the November 24 election, but I was a few weeks short of being able to stand because of the time you have to have been here 3 years before. So, I I just sort of, didn't really. I watched it all, I went to it, I always listened to the Guernsey, Assembly on the radio, I went to people's meetings all the time. I even went to states meetings all the time just because I found it interesting, and so I guess really when the by-election came in March of '25, I was like, "Well, maybe I should do
Let's
it now."
go. Yeah, yeah.
I'm I'm not really. I still do a lot of private advice for companies and things, but most of it I do for free
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because I just really want to help them and some startups, and other things, but I don't earn any salary from it. So I'm always busy. I'm always being asked for my opinion on things to do with the areas that I have
Do you
worked
know, I
in.
remember that by-election very well because I remember many people pushing you to go for it, and it was that hard as well, like, just
Yeah.
having people prodding you, basically like, "Go on, Jeannie, stick your head above the parapet, go on."
I know. And in the end, I thought, well, what have I got to lose? I can put myself forward and see what
Maybe your
happens.
mind, because
So,
it's a highly stressful job. Like, this is, it's not easy to absorb all of the problems of an island. Who, to be quite frank, it's harder to fix problems if you keep ignoring yesterday's problems. Your problems keep stacking
mhm.
up, and I'm sure people come to you not just about the runway, but about GST, and I mean, some people want to go independent, and you're like, oh my god, how does your brain hold everybody's problems? I mean, is
Well,
that
I
something you
think I
learn over
think
your career?
I think it's the key thing is to listen to people and what they have to say because um, I don't think a closed mind is a good thing in politics, and you never know when you will hear something that is actually, you know what, that's the answer, or that could work, or you always learn something from people because people are always expert at things that you're not, and I think I've approached my life like that, and I approach this like this. The one thing I would say is I had no idea that it would be as hard in Alderney than anything I have ever done in my entire life.
Really?
In my entire working life, whether it was, I spent some time in the army as well. I've done lots of things in my life. The most difficult negotiations, there is nothing harder than the States of Alderney. I'm not the only one who says that. Some of my colleagues who sort of came in recently, as Stuart and Veronica, for example, we've come from professional backgrounds where things are, there's an expectation of behavior. There's an expectation of what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. And those things are just alien to the way 35 years of whatever professional work I've never come across. So it was a real jolt to the system. It was like, I don't know if you'd call it stepping back in time. Some of it's almost medieval. I'm not talking about the civil service. I'm talking about the states of
The way it's
Alderney,
run?
how it works, the processes. Some things I don't think have been updated for forever.
Forever?
But, it takes time, and I think it's not just that. I think a lot of people are unaware of how the things actually work and what you can and can't do as a states member because it's, in a sense, a committee system. You don't have any executive power to go and take a decision on something. Decision making is all collective, and that's, in my view, one of the downfalls of the UN consensus decision making because it's the absence of formal objection is you get the lowest common denominator. And I think with many things, people can go along with something in one committee and then oppose it in another committee. And there's no. I think we need a little bit more discipline if we can, if we're going to be more, a more harmonious team than perhaps
Mm.
we are now. I'm only being critical in order to see where um, things can be improved. Not
Absolutely.
because I.
Hey, listen, we love criticism here. Like, if there's anything, we're all experts in runways. All right, yeah, and I think if that if you embrace the fact that we're all going to have an opinion, and it's all going to make it into your real life meetings. Like, I think a lot of people just assume that I don't know, don't do anything. But like, I know because of the states members that I've had on the show, it's really difficult to sit there all day long and hear all of the things and then have to make decisions. Like, you must be knackered.
um, it's frustrating at times, but I think that's why it's so important to do not just governance reform, but reform of some of the processes that we have and some of the structures that we have. And and perhaps there's been an approach in the past, well, that's the way it is, so that's the way you do it. But I think, since the 24 election, there's been people who've sort of thought, well, perhaps we need to look at this in a different way. Perhaps there might be a better way to do something. I'll give you an example. I wrote on my manifesto when I uh, went forward in for the by-election that I was really keen on housing policy. That was something I felt strongly about, something I know a fair bit about, and I thought, I'd really like to do something about that. And also, as far as I could see at that point, there wasn't a housing policy, and there wasn't anyone really. I couldn't see that there was a definite lead or anything in that area as far as I could see as an outsider. So I thought, okay, I can put my name forward to do something on that. It's not until you get inside you realize the structure makes it impossible. And I can so see why we don't have a housing policy. We are getting one now. We have a housing working group under the Policy and Finance Committee that Buster or Ian McFarlane is moving, and things are moving there, and Edward's doing a lot in there. Everyone's doing their bit. But to tell you how it was, if it's a state's own house or a government owned house, or it's handled by the General Services Committee largely. I mean, there are exceptions to the things I'm saying, but largely that's kind of the
Mm.
committee that kind of thing is handled in. If it's something to do with building or private housing, or I think even from memory, the historic buildings, and that it's in the Building Development and Control Committee. If you rent your house out privately, and you have to put it on a get approval from it's through the Economic Development Committee, and sort of looking at that. Then the Policy and Finance Committee looks after the Alderney Housing Association. And then there's the Housing Working Group under the Policy and Finance Committee.
Oh my
And
God.
it's like you've got 5 different areas across
So
3 or 4
confusing.
committees with different people being responsible. How on earth, unless you can coordinate with each of those people, and which you can do, but it just makes the job so much harder. And so you can't, and you find that in many respects, if it's education, well, Guernsey looks after that bit. We
Mhm.
can only do this bit. Um, and it's still a learning process for me, absolutely. And, I don't have necessarily the answer, but I suppose it's by seeing what isn't working and what can't work and where things need to change that you can
Mm.
see where effort needs to be made to change things to a much more workable outcome. But I think that is changing. I
I think the
think
word change scares people a lot. I think it should be evolution.
evolution.
At least the way I see it right now, I see the young people of Oldney being grossly undervalued in terms of their future. It's like the people who are sitting there saying, "Oh, we don't want change," or just trying to get in the way of progress. It's not actually your life that's going to suffer. It's the young kids who are trying to get on and off the island. Is this not just a race to the bottom, though? When we're not innovating, we're not changing. Things like GST, which are it will hugely impact families on this
Mhm.
island, and it's almost like a lazy government's way out. It's like, oh, you failed to innovate over the last 20 years of this new world, so now let's just put it on the people, or the corporations. To bring in corporation tax on a bigger level. Like, this all just seems like a really, I don't think the conversation should be about whether we want GST or not. I think the conversation should be like, well, what are we currently doing this week? Because you understand startups, 99% of them fail. That's why they throw a lot of shit against the wall and they see what sticks. I think that's the kind of energy and the working that will, should hopefully bring us
Yeah.
out of a
I I
decline.
I think you're the 2 things I'd say about that on, GST and tax reform. I think the first thing that Guernsey needs to do, and I said this to those, Guernsey politicians before the election in June when they came to Alderney, I said, "The first and foremost thing you need to do is start looking at collecting the tax that you have not collected in the last 4 years."
Oh.
And, that's the place to start.
So where would that be in what
Well,
what?
people in Guernsey, and, a lot of people haven't paid income tax. A lot of tax has not been even collected. There's once when I was stuck in Guernsey and had to stay overnight, I ended up going out with a group of people, and there was one quite very wealthy person there who said, "Well, they haven't asked me to pay my tax for 4 years." He said, "I've got it all set aside. I'm just earning money on it until such time." And it was in the millions of what his tax would have been. He was quite a very wealthy person, but he was just saying, "Until they can get around to asking me for it, I'm not going to pay it."
That's
And I had no
hilarious.
idea. And then
Oh
everyone
my
was talking,
God.
Guernsey people were talking about that. And, I think that's where they need to start. And before you start talking about new taxes, you need to start looking at how you collect the ones that are already there,
Right.
and then see what the deficit is. And I think, from my point of view, all policy should be based on evidence, data, and science. And that's where you start from. So I would like to see, what are the projected costs, sorry, the projected income that, any GST is likely to bring or not bring, or
Mm.
corporation tax is likely to bring or not bring, or what is
It's
the
not going to make a
actual
dent, right?
what well, we don't know that. It may not make a dent, it may make a big dent, but until the figures have been produced, or the projections of what they call
Mm.
in public accounting, they should be providing, the Treasury or whatever should be providing the expected benefits, so in which the politicians can base decisions. But I've not seen it. It might still be coming. I presume it is still being developed in Guernsey, but I think that's the starting point of where we're at on that. And then I think you're absolutely right, Cam, in terms of looking at innovations and things like that. And I think that's where we in the Economic Development Committee, and Edward's speech in Amsterdam was amazing. Insofar as I've been to many conferences in my life, but he was different. It captured the audience. He was different. He pointed out in the mm, final part of his speech that his colleague was, down there, and I put my hand up. Before he even walked off the stage, there was people coming over to talk to me. It was, if anything, whether it was about Bitcoin or not, that conference was about putting Alderney out there as a place that's open for business. Subsequent to that, we were there for 2 days. We were chatting, networking, doing all the usual things. People were coming up to us saying, "I heard your speech. I really like this. I had no idea where Alderney was. I'm in this area. I'm in that area." And you kind of, obviously, when people say these things, you don't know if they're really serious or not.
Mm.
But before Edward and I had even got back to Alderney, there was people wanting to speak to us, and we were slightly apprehensive because we need to do everything, especially as we would do, with the civil service involved, so that and so we're trying to delay, people until such time as we can come back. So as soon as we were back and we set up, it was not that long ago. It was one Thursday, the first round of people who wanted to speak to us. And that particular day, Edward was on some of the calls, but he had to go to Guernsey. Stuart was on all the calls. I was on the calls, and someone from the civil service was on all the calls. There were a couple that were quite technical to do with electrical side of things, and Chris McGregor from AEL joined those two calls. But it was 9 to 10, 10 to 11, 11 to 12, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, and 4 to 5. We scheduled those in terms of an hour each call,
Oh
because
my
we thought
God.
we thought that we would have a half an hour call, see what they wanted, what we were going to talk about, and that we would, have breaks. Every call went pretty much until we had to say, "This call has to stop because we need to go to the next one." But every single one of these um, people were so dynamic and so interested, and all from so you had professors from, significant universities who've set up Bitcoin cities, and who have but looked broader than Bitcoin. It's about a whole mindset of thinking of how you change or build a city in a particular way, that is very innovative, and looking at digital economy and all that sort of thing. And um, that call was one of the most amazing ones. There was another young guy who was Swiss and from the UK, Swiss and UK, who who presented a very, very strategic view of what we could do, and offered him. himself to sort of help put us in this map, and how you would do it. And people came without even being asked to those meetings with presentations. And, a lot of people say, "Oh, yeah, how much money did they want for a consultancy?" In most cases, they weren't even asking for that. And I remember Edward saying to them, "Well, why is it that you're so interested in Alderney, or why do you want to help?" And the answer back, was, "Well, because you're a government that is embracing this area and you want to develop and you want to grow and you have a low tax environment and you have all the credentials for what this area is looking for." And that's a breath of fresh air to us.
Hmm.
So we'll help as much as we can. We don't need, big consultancies. We want to help this happen because it helps us. And equally, there was one, from the other side of it, there was one sort of big hedge fund, management fund that was looking to locate in Dubai because, as you've said, people want to leave London, and they had their whole team of people, very credible London based fund management company, and they said, we did look at Guernsey and Jersey, but we ruled them out because the cost of entry was too high, and this, so we're going to Dubai. But now we've heard of Alderney. We're in January. We are, because these calls were all in at the end of December. In January, we would like to consider Alderney possibly, and we need to go to the next steps. Now, we only formed the Economic Development Committee again for, the chair of that committee, again, elected was Stuart Clark yesterday. And Edward, I and Stuart sort of been leading on this area. I think, they're still at us saying, "What's the next step? When can we come? What can we do?" So we will discuss it next week, but it's looking likely that we will host a big event in probably May when it's a bit warmer and the transport's a bit more reliable. And we will get a lot of these people together to discuss what is possible for Alderney. And I think, gosh, to me, it was the most amazing outward looking thing that Alderney has done for certainly in the short time I've been here, but and it has had so many economies of scale in terms of the benefits that it has brought.
Mm. So whether it's Bitcoin, renewable energy, data centers, like everything's being looked at, right? But
Yes,
what about the things that currently are right in front of us? We have a swimming pool, which I'm sure you don't want to answer anything about because I know you've probably got some plans in the works. But this swimming pool is been half finished now for nearly a decade of our lives.
yes.
I think a lot of people would probably say, why look at the bigger picture when you can't get that done?
Because you need the bigger picture to generate the revenue to pay for the local infrastructure that we have here. I mean, I think it was 2014 or something like that, that someone came up, I think it was Francis Simonet, from what I understand, came up with the idea of having an e-gambling industry here. And that was sort of the same view people
Yeah,
have of Bitcoin now. He had that, and that went on to develop into a very successful thing where our capital budgets
huge amount of money, right?
money comes into Alderney for our capital improvement, and that's what we've used to do the
But
roads. And
Facebook wasn't around back then, so no one was around to shut down the idea of the gaming commission, and yet, now we're trying to reinvent it with other things, but now everyone's watching you, everyone's commenting. How does that feel like? Because I know that you put a lot of effort in, and then to kind of before you've even walked through the door, you're now reading, a dozen different comments of people. It's
I mean, I do find it frustrating because one of the things, I'm absolutely a facts-based person. Everything I do, even if it's in my own personal life, I have to have facts before I make decisions. And social media is an entirely different thing because people can just spout off what they think without even checking a fact.
guilty.
And you look at things and you go, "Oh my goodness."
Yeah.
Um, and originally, I started off trying to correct things or comment things, but people
You
just
can't work quick enough.
you can't. Not only that, people then get even a worse end of the
Yeah, of
stick,
course.
and you might comment on things, and then you stop commenting because it's like it's not
Not
going to
worth
be
it.
any use to do this, and then you get other people saying, well, the state's members only talk when they want to be elected, but not any other time. And I just think you cannot win.
Mm.
And I've also, so then I got to just sort of, if I saw something I liked, I would like it or whatever. But I have been wrapped over the knuckles for liking certain things
What?
as being a state's member.
Hold on a second. This might bring us into what is probably the most important thing I want to ask you. What the hell is this code of conduct thing? Like, aren't we in a free speech society? Are you not allowed to say everything that you want without getting wrapped around the knuckles? Can we even talk about this? Is this
we,
censorship?
uh, I'm. I don't know if I'm there.
No,
How can I put this?
this is fine because
I've
this is
I've
affecting everyone right now.
I've had, in the very sort of 10 months I've been in, I've had 4 code of conducts, against me. Um, um, I I I'm flabbergasted in a sense as
Wow.
to, 2 were under the old system, which, went, via the president, and 2 have been in the new system with our commissioner of standards. I think the difference between the 2 is breathtaking insofar as, uh, in the old system, you weren't really allowed to know the information of what you were actually being accused of. It was all very,
Whoa.
um well, at least in my experience, I was told there were 2. I had to kinda guess who they were from until one of them actually told me he had made one of the ones, and I had to say, "Why?" Like, what
Yeah,
you know?
yeah,
But
because you can.
it was an interesting experience to go through of being accused of something without knowing what you had been accused of and exactly why, and then kind of being judged in how you behaved or didn't behave, but without even able to being really able to defend yourself. I found that a very
Mm.
difficult thing to go through, and I'm sure those who have been through them before me, who also had the same experience, because it's all very hush hush. You're not really in.
Must be stressful as hell.
It probably was a very, because one of them happened, in my first month. So I was very stressed because I had no concept.
Of what it
I had
was.
in everything,
Yeah.
as I was saying at the very beginning of this interview, the things that you know as being standard ways of expectation of professional behavior, I found just not there, and it was like, how does a society exist without these 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 kind of, it's almost like the expectation of democracy was just like, where did that go? And I found that very, very stressful because I didn't it was outside my comfort zone because I had no idea what I was dealing with. Under our new commissioner for standards, it's a very different system, and I think a very good one. Ours is different to Guernsey's in that ours is very distanced from the politicians, so there is a complete separation. Like in Guernsey, when something happened recently, it then went back into the states to decide whether the commissioner was right or wrong. In our case, the commissioner's view is the view of the commissioner, who arbitrates on the dispute, and then if the person who has been accused, or whichever way it comes out, one of the parties feels that it has been unfairly dealt with, there is a separate independent appeals process that can be gone through. And after that second appeal, if that is concluded, that's the end of it. You can't then come back to the States of Order and go, hey, I didn't think I was treated fairly. The commissioner is a commissioner for standards who looks at the standards. So when my first one came under that system, I was delighted to see, um,
Got reviewed
well,
and then
no, it's even better. It's like the first thing you see is a letter from the commissioner saying there's been a code of conduct against you, um, for these reasons, or you just sort of very basic these reasons. Then attached to that is the person who's accused you of whatever it is letter, so you can see. And not only
Oh,
that,
that's better.
you see all the supporting evidence to that. So any emails or any points of clarification, you are given all of the information. Now you don't speak about it, and I didn't, but you have that, so you know what the and the commissioner then sends a document that says this is the code of conduct which we have agreed to in the states of Alderney. This is the basis on which I will be considering this. So you know absolutely, and then I in my mind people were saying, oh, if it comes against you, or well, I was thinking in my head, if it comes against me, no, I will accept the commissioner's view because I think we have to support this system because it is fair and it is done properly, and you have to have faith in a system that we have agreed to. And both of the ones that I received were dismissed as being inadmissible because they were deemed by the Commissioner for Standards to not be.
Jesus. What a waste of time, though. What a
It
waste
is,
of
and
your energy.
not just time, money, because these cost the states of Alderney money. 15,000. This was asked at the People's Meeting. £15,000 was put aside for the Commissioner's time on a yearly basis. She doesn't earn that, but should there be codes of conduct, that amount of money was put there to hear things. Well, I had two, and I think it used up from I can't be. I mean, one of my colleagues had one as well, another one, and but I think it used up about four or
Is there
five
not? I
thousand
mean, there must be no
pounds.
one in the States now that hasn't had one thrown at them. I mean, is there any squeaky clean people?
No, I think
But
I
by
think I'm
squeaky
the
clean,
only one who has.
has
No, me and one other. Another naughty person
another naughty person.
has had one that I am aware of. There could have been others, but there's
Okay.
only two. Well, I had two, and the other person had one. In a sense, in that one, we were accused by the same person for the same thing. So it is, and I hope, what my hope is, that as we move forward, the States of Alderney becomes a much more professional, cohesive place where this sort of childish behaviour doesn't
Because we're not
continue.
talking about like massive, like you're not stealing money from the state's
No,
coffers. It's a code of conduct. It's the way they're behaving. Like people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones.
no,
Because we're all doomed as an island if our politicians can't get along with each other. I
yeah,
mean, I find it amazing because people wonder why people like Trump exist in the world, and these systems rise. And when leadership fails, activism rises, and when activism rises, it's left and right. And actually, you'll probably find that the one on the right is going to get in there first. And so, I look at places like Alderney, and I'm like, guys, this should be so easy to just move forwards. But then you hear the stories of people that don't like people and everything like that. I mean, I'm not religious, but we all need Jesus right now. Do you know what I mean? We all need a little bit of, like, maybe if Mother Samantha's listening to this, just please separate all of your problems and let's just go through a list of 100 bad
yeah.
ideas and fail.
We we
That's
could
embracing that failure
we
is
could
important.
go so much faster in the States of Alderney with some more streamlined processes, and some more collaborative behaviours among some of the members. And I think, hopefully, we're getting there. I think on the economic development side, where people are commenting that they're seeing change. Our only, you know, feeling is we wish we could do more, but we're
Sure.
doing what we can.
Yeah.
But it's a changed environment. I'd like to see, younger people come into the States, but for us who are there now, who are, toward the end of our careers more, who are using our experience to try and put some of these changes in place so that when people can come along later, things are working better than they are now. And I think I'm an entirely optimistic glass half full person, so I'm hoping that we get there. But I think collectively we can. We've worked really well on economic development, and as I sort of said in my speech yesterday, a lot of people see the working together as the gang, the clique, but it isn't
It's
that.
getting stuff done,
All it
guys.
is that,
Yeah,
we're different ages, we're
yeah.
different sexes, we're different, everything,
Mm.
and yet we have made an effort amongst 4 people who, in our case, in this case, who didn't know each other, to put any, issues aside and just get on it because we need to work for the future of Alderney. And that's all we've done. We haven't become a clique, we've become a working group, and we've
Yeah,
become
yeah, yeah.
a proper committee in how I would have see committees of whatever I've been involved in the past. But there are misinterpretations of that, which I hope we can get beyond.
Before we continue, I want to say a massive thank you to Alderney Electricity for backing this podcast. On an island of just 2,000 people, sometimes it can be quite easy to take the energy we have for granted. But behind every light switch is a team of electricians, engineers, and administrators working hard to keep us going. But they don't just power our homes, they power our community with local sponsorship like this. Alderney Electricity continues to support the events, the projects, and of course the stories that bring our island together. Alderney Electricity, thank you very much for keeping our lights on and for sponsoring this podcast. I don't know how you're dealing with all this right now because I mean it's I don't think we're grateful enough to any of the states members. Even all the past ones. Like I think I'm really grateful that someone's willing to step into the arena. They might not agree with my ideas, and I know for sure that many of the states members don't, or at least the previous ones did. But I still respect the fact that they were
Yeah.
willing to go and do it because it's a thankless job.
Well, I did say that to Bill, in my talk, and I think a lot of other people had speeches prepared to thank Bill as well. But unfortunately, in the meeting yesterday,
Because Bill's leaving.
yeah, no, he's not leaving the States, but he stepped down. It was his choice to step down as chair of policy and finance. He's done an amazing job. He
Yeah.
stepped in when nobody else wanted to do it, and he has led. As I said, he's kept the ship on course, and there's been, you know, he deals with the matters in a very traditional way. That's his own word, um, but he does things with complete dedication, and it's been difficult for him because he's had 5 new members, 50% of who he has to deal with in his committee, you know, being difficult
Of
in
course,
a
yeah.
sense because
Well,
we're
got
new,
to show him the ropes.
we're learning, we don't know, and we're challenging and all that sort of thing. So he's had a difficult time, but he has led, well, and he has, enabled us to learn, and I said that yesterday. As I said, a lot of us did. A lot of others had people prepared to say things, but the opportunity was not provided for them to make any statements. But I think that is, he will still remain a states member for, and well, he comes up for election like I do, in November next year. There'll be, 5 of us, and whether people stand or not, I don't know if Bill will stand again, but, he's certainly, he's still got a lot of, life left in him in terms of his time on the States. There's things he's mentioned to me that he would like to do, and, I'm sure he can do those. I also think, I think going forward, some of the, people who have played a more of a backseat role may come more to the front. I think the recognition of some people, like, for example, Derwent. Derwent is very experienced aviation background. He has a huge amount to offer, and also in terms of he has a lot of, which I didn't know about until recently, sort of, digital Bitcoin. He's got lots of, and it he's not the sort of person who sort of broadcasts, "This is all my knowledge," or very loudly, but when you sit and talk to him, he has a huge amount of knowledge, and I think, he's joining Economic Development Committee now, and I think will become a very valuable, person in that committee, and, he was the one who nominated me for Chair of Policy and Finance, so, I think,
Thank you, Derwent.
thank you, Derwent.
So, I mean, the other funny thing I find, when you go to a people's meeting and people are shouting at the states members, and then you go across the blonde hedgehog afterwards, and you're just talking about normal life again. Like, is it hard to detach, work and just having fun? So, I don't think that in any other places in the world they go from debating people straight into the pub, like with their community as well. That must be a strange occurrence.
Yeah, I think the people's meeting way of things is in my view very unique to Alderney, but I like it. I think it does work. I wish more people from the community would come, so that we didn't just have the same people asking the same questions. I think it would be much better if a broader representation of the community came and asked some
Mm.
questions, and
I mean, do you think they
challenged
should
a bit
be
more.
not televised, but broadcast on social media? I mean,
I think
I'm
I
sure a lot more people would tune in if they could
Yes,
just watch on their
I
phone.
do. I think that's one of the things that, I will raise because or it has been raised before, but see follow up and see where that's
Yeah, because the States of Alderney has an active Facebook page. I mean, it's great, to see more posts going online. And I always, whenever the States of Alderney post something, I'm like, oh my God, please. I look at the comments, I'm like, oh, cool. No one's, because sometimes like, and the algorithm works like this. It's like if a few people comment on it, then suddenly it gets showed to more people. And the next thing you know, it's going to snowball into like, something that's going to come into your email box in the morning. You're like, oh, for God's sake, that's not the truth, or whatever it is. But that is kind of the way that people, communicate these days. So I mean, I just think a lot more people would get involved. I remember only ever speaking once at it, and I was illfully unprepared, because you're passionate when you're sat there, you want to stand
mm.
up and say something. But something I've learned from yourself and Edward is gotta gotta have your notes. Because it's like you stand up
Well,
and then you go, "Ugh," and then
no,
there's a gut feeling. It's
I think
horrible.
that's very much a personal thing. I mean, I there's one of us who doesn't need to do that, and he's amazing in my view of his ability to listen to something really complex, take it all in, and then deliver out of his mouth the most amazing questions or the most amazing answers.
Who are
And
you talking about?
Buster, Ian McFarlane.
Ah, fantastic.
I've worked in my years with many barristers, and you know that skill.
Right, right, right.
Buster has that skill. If he'd been trained, he would be a brilliant barrister in my view. I've said that to him. I totally think it. Some of us need to take copious notes. Some of
Sure.
us need to, to remind or to ensure that we've captured something in a way because we're more detailed people. Some people just, and it's rare, can just take, even facts and figures and percentages and I've seen Buster just listen to some things and then come out at the end with this question with everything there just from his head. And I know people say, "Oh, he uses AI and all that." Like, so what?
Everyone uses AI
Everyone
now.
uses
Yeah,
it, but
literally.
so what? But in these
Yeah.
cases, he's not because he's in a meeting listening and
Yeah.
then delivering it back.
But he's also grown up here. I mean, I grew up with Buster, and obviously I was coming back and forth from the UK. So he has seen all of the iterations of the states, and I think 10 years ago was my first presentation to the Economic Development Committee. So I've been banging on this door for 10 years, and every time there's a new group of states members, you have to say the same. You have to start from scratch again. And I think that's probably something that someone like Buster, who's sort of just seen it all, is kind of just speaking from the point of an old new man. He's a real old new man, and he's saying it as it is, and he is the youngest on the states. But age is not always
No,
the best
no,
indicator.
age is not. Some of the in terms of age, Edward and I are the same age. Stuart and Buster are, younger. Veronica's the same age as well. And then, you go up when you with Bill and Kevin's only a few years older than me. So, some of us are around that age. But, if there are people on the island who even yourself, Cam, your age group or whatever, who consider standing at the
I
next
would.
election in
Hey,
November.
someone's got to do the work. I appreciate that. I appreciate what a government does, and and I'm definitely on the other side of it, and I think that's something that, my dad, running Alderney Week and getting involved in things. I would never want to do it. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'd like to be heard and I'd like my ideas to be funded, but I don't think I could deal with it, to be honest with you. I mean, because it is such a hard job, like and the times when I have seen what you do, I go, oh, no way, not my brain. I'm a creative. Like I'm messy, I'm scrappy, I fail a lot, like, and these code of conducts, I would, I would, oh yeah,
Yeah, but I think people are learning that the cost of vexatious, code of conducts is costly to the states of Alderney now that we have a commissioner for standards, and also if they are deemed to be inadmissible, vexatious, and have no standing, then they're going to be dismissed. So hopefully that will deter people
mhm,
from taking a frivolous attitude to codes of conducts. They should be there for real, whether it's from the community or whether it's from another states member, should be there for real breaches of
yeah,
conduct,
serious shit,
serious
yeah, yeah,
breaches of
yeah, not
conduct,
just
not
like,
to act as a scary weapon against people to scare them into submission or not to speak. And you were speaking earlier about freedom of speech. I and some of my colleagues, Stuart especially, are very strong defenders of freedom of and Buster as well, actually, and Edward. We all speak about it. Um, Defenders of freedom of speech, and that is a real concern in terms of the ID card and these sorts of things that the UK is going down the route of. Because whilst the UK might decide to do that, is Guernsey going to adopt that? And then is it going to be passed into us here? And these are things that we need to start finding out about early on so that we can manage, what Alderney does or decides not to do in those contexts. Because I think freedom of speech is unfortunately being restricted. People are becoming more scared. It's not just about the things that were not to speak about, or, you learned over many years from a child even,
mm,
why racism is wrong, and, all these things and because it's your belief that you've grown up with, that these things don't, people who say things in certain areas. But now when it comes to the things that you see now for people singing a religious song on a street, that's, they inappropriate, or, I'm not going to sing a religious song on a street, but if somebody wants to do that, why can't they?
yeah,
Or
yeah,
if somebody wants to write their opinion in an article in a newspaper that isn't representing anything other than the opinion of a person, why should they not
yeah,
be allowed to do and say that? And in the broader sense, freedom of speech is a fundamental pillar of our culture and society, not just Alderney, but
mm,
the whole um, English and or the broadest, broader English, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, however you sort of think of our underpinnings of law, is, the John Locke going back to sort of 1700s, sort of, or even later. The individual is free above the state. We have power above the state. We have a right, which is why we don't have to carry ID cards. Back in the 80s in Australia, an election was lost from one side of government wanting to bring ID cards out for spurious reasons, because it was such an offence to one's individual freedom. And, that's the difference between the English, say, or sort of Great Britain in the European Union, and Ireland, in the European Union. We're not in that anymore. But, the rest of we have a system of freedom. The law permits you to do anything. Sorry, you can do anything unless the law
is against it.
prevents you, whereas the Roman-based law is, you can't do something unless the law permits it. So it's
Right,
very
interesting.
different. So that's why, the Napoleonic Code, you need a wardrobe to fit the law into, of these are all the things you can do. Whereas in our law, common law and, other things, you can do whatever you like unless there's a law
Against it.
against it. So it's a very different philosophy, and yet
Yeah.
we're becoming more and more, um, the law coming down on what we as individuals and our individual freedoms. And as I said earlier, I'm a classic liberal. John Gladstone, our former prime minister in the UK from mid 1850s, he was the prime minister, I think, 5 times. An amazing man, and not a lot of people,
Mm.
know his history or whatever. But he's the person responsible for the Married Women's Property Act, and a lot of things that we just take for granted now, which in some cases being eroded by some of these freedoms, some of the things that he stood for,
Mm.
and we need to learn more about him and applaud him.
No, absolutely. I mean, you know what they say: give a man a stick, and he'll find someone to beat with it. All of these freedom of speech stuff. I think that is very scary. But I also find the end of a hype cycle quite scary as well. Like whenever in history, technology's been introduced or new systems have been introduced, it's not gone easy. That everything's really painful. The only bit of advice I like to give to people is that you only have to trust someone 50%. You don't need to have complete trust in someone to give them your support. And one of the things that we always suffer with on Alderney is, don't trust that person because 20 years ago they tried to do something and they failed.
Mm.
That mentality is so jarring. And the stories that we tell each other matter so much. You go to the sailing club and you tell someone a story. Then you're up to the Georgian and you've heard that story told back to you, but in a different way. Stories matter so, so, so much. And so, yeah, maybe if you don't trust them, more than 49%, go for it. But
Yeah.
if you haven't quite, got the trust for them, but they're not that bad, just shut up. Do you know what I mean? Just don't. It's not worth
Yeah, and
peddling.
everybody deserves a second chance, even if they did something 20 years ago, like, there may have been and you never know the full story. As I said, I try as far as possible to, you know, build things on facts, and, when even uh, everything should be based on science and evidence, which is why I feel so strongly that any policy that, or policy decisions that we make on anything, from vaping to medicines to policing to anything, you know, is this an overkill reaction to something? If something occurred to one person, do we need to bring in draconian laws in terms of law enforcement? If I just think we need to sort of look at facts,
Mm,
look at evidence, look at, just because B follows A doesn't mean A caused B.
mhm,
Um, there's many reasons why, and people should, you know, look and learn and listen and, get into what is behind something, especially in this more modern world when we're seeing a lot of fake stuff. Does
mhm.
this add up? Is this correct? Um, and should I believe this? If you can base something on, so I know it's even hard to know what is a solid fact anymore if you're looking at AI.
It's
Uh,
it's it's actually really like it's just I'm really bored. I'm so bored of the internet right now, And there is this theory called the dead internet theory, which is that I think it was 2017 or 19 or something, that the amount of human traffic online got surpassed by bots. And that was before the boom of AI. Nowadays, you've got all this AI slop, which makes people like me who have a decade experience in marketing. I go, what's the point? Well, what's the point now? Because, the people who built these online channels 10 years ago, which is why I was banging on to the States of Oil 10 years ago, unless you've built those channels already and you have a mass audience, your ability to grow that audience large, now you're fighting against so
yeah.
much attention. And so you're almost like, right, that's it, give up, AI's here. And I think I would say my generation are not optimistic about, buying a house, being able to get a career or a job. Why would a senior lawyer hire a junior lawyer these days? It's like my junior lawyer is my AI,
Mm.
so you haven't got a lot of hope, which I mean, well, I personally am a little bit
Although
out of it.
I'm quite, in my own experience of, one of the first times I did use AI was I'd written an article on using an optional protocol to in terms of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. I know it's and an optional protocol is what gives an individual a right to bring something against an international law. These were put into treaties in the 1960s to two main human rights treaties, and so due to a case I worked on in Australia in the 90s when I was in the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, I was thinking the same philosophy about a modern issue. So I wrote this and I wrote a 6,000 word article. I was going to go through the academic way of doing it where you have to sort of put it in for peer review and all that. And then I've just got a bit lazy on that and I thought I can't be bothered. I'm just going to send it to, as it is.
Whoever, yeah.
And there was an American journal that wanted to publish it, but they said we don't sort of take publications. It needs to be cut down to 2,500 words, and I'd done 6,000 words. So I went, oh, okay. And then it was actually them that said, "Why don't you just put it in AI and get it to?" So I thought, oh, I hadn't even thought of AI. It just
Of
didn't
course,
didn't
yeah,
enter
yeah,
my
yeah.
brain. So I put it in and asked it to do that. But the result I got it was ChatGPT, I think it was. Um, the result I got was not correct, and it
Yeah,
was only
yeah.
when I read it and I thought, "Oh my god." And then I know it was a very highly specialized area, like, it was really only people who'd worked in international public law that would understand, like, what I was well, not would understand it, but that would be able to do what I was doing because it was a very specialized area, and this application was a new application, and I thought, "Oh my god," like, and it gave me after that, I thought AI's I didn't think AI is terrible. I just thought you cannot trust it. You cannot trust it because if you didn't really know your topic area and you put that into AI and got back what I'd got and then I read over it but you used it, it would be completely wrong.
Mm.
And so that gave me a quite a concern of you still have to be if you want to use AI for things, you still need to be very careful.
So before we finish this episode, I want to thank Bell & Co for sponsoring this podcast. If you're looking for a place to live on Alderney, whether it's renting or buying, go and visit Bell & Co. They have all the information about what's available on Alderney, and they can also guide you with some of the best things to do on the island. Go and visit bellandco.com where you can see how to escape to paradise. Whether you're a remote worker, a carer, or just want to raise a family in somewhere safe, Bell & Co is there to help you. So what else do you like about Alderney then? What's your day-to-day life look like? Because I can't imagine, it's all politics and business.
Recently, it has become
Of course.
mostly that. My life, I swim. Well, I haven't recently, much to my. It was my New Year's resolution to return to swimming in the morning with my swim buddies, um, but I have not had the chance to do that. Why? Because I end up going to bed so late,
Of course, yeah,
like
yeah.
1 and 2 in the morning by the time you get through everything. And then you've got to be somewhere at 9 o'clock or even 9 or 10 that I just I'm just sort of exhausted.
And
And
it is
then
very cold as well. Like
I don't
when you
mind
look out the window and it's pissing it down rain, and you're like, man, not today.
I don't mind the cold because it's sort of you almost get addicted to the refreshingness of that. I did go just before Christmas a few times and I found it,
Fine,
fine.
yeah. It's
Um,
around between February and January, you get, oof.
yeah, but I still would do that if I had time. And I
Yeah.
said to it, I feel really guilty because I said I'm coming back to swimming. I really want to get there. And then I just don't because circumstance takes over
Yeah, of
circumstance.
course.
And I've said the same about
Mm.
Pilates. I absolutely love going to my Pilates on Monday with Natalie, on Friday with Beth, and then to one yoga class with Claire
Oh,
Evans.
fantastic.
But I just
Yeah,
don't
yeah. Now,
do
now you
them.
kind of got to juggle it,
And
hey?
then, you make all these plans, and then, but I absolutely am going to change my routine so that I actually make time for me in these things
Good.
because otherwise it will just, I know
Yeah.
what I'm like. I am a workaholic.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think I will probably be like your label was
I mean,
working?
you know, everyone's got a breaking point, and yeah, and I think it is very important, obviously, to try and relax a little bit, which is why I'd like to please encourage anyone that has any issues or code of conducts they want to do, leave this poor woman alone, man. Let them get on with it. I think, you know, like part of my problem is because I like to talk a lot. You know, I sometimes say things a lot, and I don't realize the amount of problems I cause people. You know, just by prodding something that I don't really need to prod. So yeah, you get a year's free card, you know, all the states members, whatever you guys have got to do, crack on,
Thank you. I
because, you know,
appreciate
no,
that. And
seriously.
I think some of the things that you do and all the podcasts that you do and all the things that I've seen that you have done, all the Alderney things, I send them to people all over the world
Thank you.
because I think they're amazing. And I think, your marketing of Alderney is very special.
I really
But
appreciate
I
it.
think a lot of people do appreciate that
I
on
think
the
so.
island.
I mean, but like it's a team effort, and I think that's what makes me just want to just like yeah let the states members do what they need to do, and yeah, I mean, I hope the people who are giving you all the grief. I know they call them NIMBYs for a reason, right? You know, not in my backyard because there's nothing in my backyard that I don't want you to do. So yeah, I mean, I really wish you a really good year, obviously, and I will be. I'll be here in my bedroom interviewing people.
And I mean, my only thing would say is the elections will be coming up in November. We are going to need some good people, um, hopefully some younger people, to stand for election and to represent Alderney going forward. So if you can encourage anyone or you
Oh
know
yeah,
of
yeah,
anyone,
of course.
please, there's no special skills required. No one should be daunted. Everyone's equal. Everyone can come along and there are job descriptions being written now for states members, which is
Interesting.
part of the was part of the pay review. So that will be, that will be coming in. But it as that says, there are no special skill sets required apart from good communication, ability to listen, and people have the states members have had to put forward what they think the role is to try and develop what that job description should be. So, but we do need some, there will be a need for some more people in November this year, I think.
November. Okay, so you hear it, folks. If you are interested in becoming a states member, yeah, I think this is a really good time for it. Yeah, I've got a good feeling about it. At least I think a lot more people are going to be needing really good leaders in this next few years. So yeah, go and how do you even become a states member? What do you have to do? Go and like get people's votes and stuff? Like,
Well, you have to be on the electoral roll. You have to have lived in Alderney for 3 years, and be currently still living here. And you nominate when the nominations will be opened at some point. I think a month or some weeks before the actual elections, and then you put your name in. There's a closing date. You need a nominator and a seconder. My wonderful nominator was Vanessa Main, and my seconder was Dr. Sally Simmons. I hope that if I'm fairly sure at this point I will stand again in the November election, and I hope both Vanessa and Sally will nominate and second me again. But we'll see what happens then. But that's all you need, and so I'm sure there's people out there who, have who even if you just want to you're young and you wanna have a go and see if it is something that you are interested in, you can, do it for a short time and maybe come back to it later, or you might like it and you stick at it, and you might be very good at it,
mm.
and,
What about the role of president? I'll take president if that's going. Is that a thing that you can apply for?
yes,
You can apply to be a president.
yes, the
Wow.
president's job is elected, so the
Oh
president's role
wow.
comes up, every 4 years. I think it's a oh gosh, I'm trying to think if it's the same 4 years, well, there's 2 elections of the state's members, and, his in this case, it's a he, comes round every,
Ooh, have we had a female president yet of Alderney?
I
I
don't think
don't
so.
know. Maybe hold a second. Well, maybe it's time we did. No, but I guess this is the funny thing is if people don't understand how crazy our political system is here. I mean, it doesn't sound that crazy, but we have a president who doesn't have much power. Is that right? Or has a bit of power?
Um,
Um,
he
can
the
deploy
role
emergency funds if in the time of crisis.
I don't know, in terms of the role is largely diplomatic, ceremonial, and, representative. That would be how the job of president in Alderney is designated. Um, Also, there is a role to sit and orchestrate, in a sense, the States of Alderney members while they're.
Ooh, okay. So the president does have to keep you lot.
Yes,
Wow. So he's the man with the stick.
yes.
I love that. That's why I want the job. That sounds like a great job.
Um, it's not supposed to be a political role at all, and I think, as part of the good governance, that is, part of the considerations to probably make that line between what is political and what is ceremonial and representative a much clearer line, so that there is that, clarity for whoever may in the future, come into the role. Or but just to ensure that that separation is there. The president does have the casting vote at the moment in should there be an equal outcome of
Ooh.
any vote. Well, that happened.
Has that happened?
Yeah, it happened with the outcome on the pay review. It was 5 each way. 5 members were against the amendment that was being presented by Mr. Gentle, and 5 members were for the amendment being presented by Mr. Gentle. And so when it came to the decision, that meant that the president had the casting vote, but he chooses, because he is trying to be not political, that he doesn't want to get involved in a political discussion or decision, rather. So he said,
Flip a
at
coin.
no, no, I think he did it very well, actually. I think his way of dealing that was to say the purpose of this amendment to what had been agreed was to change a decision or to change what was being put forward in the law. And because a majority had not been reached, therefore it fell to the existing position, which meant that those who were not supporting the amendment, the outcome was positive for them,
Interesting.
which
Wow.
was the side, when I say the side I was on, because I didn't think, as I was saying earlier, that I thought that we shouldn't put time and process in the way of bringing it. It had been suggested by the independent person looking at um, the pay rise that it should be 17,500, and the decision in policy and finance was that that should happen straight away, not wait for another year, more or less. And Mr. Gentle's amendment was to bring back it to 15,000, and so it was put that no, it should start at, because if the objective of this is to attract younger people and to try and get it towards the minimum wage at least, why put time? If you think that's the right thing to do, why wait 2 years to do
Sure.
it?
Yeah, yeah,
Why
yeah.
not do
Do
it
it
now?
now.
And that was, I mean, everyone had different reasons as to why they wanted it. They were the reasons I put, and in the end, that was one. So the president dealt with it that way, and I think he did deal with that in a very appropriate way, which is
Excellent.
what he
Yeah,
should
yeah,
do.
yeah. Well, Mr. El Presidente, I know he listens to these. I really do. So come on, William, come and get your ass in my bedroom chair.
Oh, has he not,
Um,
have you invited him on? I think
I
he
keep emailing him, and I must have the wrong email address.
Oh,
Yeah. So, but I would love to chat to. Listen, I want to chat to anyone. I'm not a politician. And obviously anyone can talk about politics, right? But it's only the people who are involved in it who I'd really like to come here and talk about it. But yeah, I mean, it's about people's lives, and for me, it's just a pleasure because, personally, I don't know how long I'm gonna, be on Alderney, in terms of the opportunities in the world. Obviously, I'd love to make this my forever home, but world's a big place.
I think, to go back to the reality of the situation, if we can bring some of the people that we've been talking to, we call it the Bitcoin people, but it's not all
It's
about Bitcoin.
entrepreneurs,
It's
right?
entrepreneurs, it's about future looking, it's about building things here that can build or earn money for Alderney and bring skills and industry to Alderney
Mm.
that is in an innovative and future way. And honestly, I do feel quite compelled by the response, as I said earlier, that Edward and I had in Amsterdam and what has happened subsequently. It's incredible, more than I ever thought. If we can harness that and work with it to build what we need here in Alderney, we have the opportunity to set up things like a futuristic, innovative, um, let's call it for the sake of it, educational hub place. Where all these skills we can have people from St Anne's School coming into this area. We could use, say, the old Connaught as a physical place to base something like this, or somewhere else.
Mm.
I'm just sort of saying, highlighting what might be available and what is vacant and has been a long time. But that we need to think outside the box a bit, but we absolutely need to build this. And I really don't. I know everyone says things on Alderney take a very long time, but this is moving so fast, and we need to move with it. And I think, so stay tuned, Cam. Stay here.
I
You
will.
don't know when, this has legs.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So long as it's not, scuppered before it gets to what it's, are meant to achieve. But I think people need to have an open mind. They need to understand perhaps what they don't know and be open-minded to that. And
Chill out a little bit, guys. Just
yeah,
chill out a little bit. All right. Like you're
yeah,
living in paradise. I think
yeah.
that's the thing. You live in paradise, democracy is kept us free for so many years. Dr. Sally was telling me we need a good war just to get us disciplined again. I thought, yep, hang on a second, how old am I? I'm like, oops. I just conscripted myself, literally. Well, listen, thank you very, very much for coming in. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about? Obviously, there is no end time to these things,
No, I
except
think
for the people who've got some stuff to do.
I think we've probably, I can't I don't even have any concept of how long we've been talking, but it's been a fair while, I think. And
Oh,
thank you so much for the interview, and we'll see
we'll see what happens in the
see what
future.
happens.
Jeannie Cameron, thank you so much.
Thank you, Cam.